My stepdaughter insulted me in front of her friends and called me the wannabe dad. The next morning, I threw her out of my house and blocked her access to all my funds and properties. What happened next was rather unexpected. I will tell you everything. First, let me quickly thank you for your continuous support. This means a lot to us. If you enjoy the stories we share, kindly subscribe to this channel. It will be great if you can leave a comment on which city you are watching from. We might just give you a shout out in our next story. Today's special shout out goes to Johnny Armstrong from New York. We are glad you enjoy our stories. Now let's go deeper into the story. I never wanted to be anyone's replacement. That was clear from the beginning. When I met Carla, she was already a mother. Her daughter, Jada, was 12, just old enough to keep her guard up and just young enough to crave stability. I wasn't trying to be her dad. I never introduced myself that way, never demanded it, never asked for that title. All I wanted was to be there. Steady. Present. Someone who wouldn't vanish when things got inconvenient. Carla was beautiful, ambitious, and coming off a brutal divorce. I was in a comfortable place, own business, quiet house, no kids of my own. It could have stayed simple, but I fell for the idea of family. I chose that life. I chose them. The first year, Jada barely spoke to me unless prompted. I'd get nods, eye rolls, grunts. Carla said it was normal. She's protective, she'd say, brushing my arm in reassurance. She'll come around. So I waited. I drove her to school, sat through middle school concerts, and paid for every little thing her father never showed up for. I didn't mind. I told myself that respect wasn't given, it was earned. And God, I tried to earn it. When she wanted a horse-themed birthday party, I built a makeshift stable in the backyard. When she failed math, I hired a private tutor. When she cried over friends who turned on her, I was the one sitting outside her room, just waiting for her to say anything. I never pushed. I just wanted to be a constant in a world that had already let her down too many times. But nothing I did ever seemed to be enough. By the time she turned 16, it was like living with a stranger who hated me just for existing. Carla always made excuses. Teenage girls are tough, she'd say. She doesn't mean it. But sometimes, Carla didn't see what I saw. How Jada would go completely cold when I walked into a room. How she'd talk to me like I was the help. How she'd purposely exclude me from conversations, plans, even pictures. I chalked it up to immaturity, tried not to take it personally. But it ate at me. Quietly, steadily, it chipped away at whatever warmth I used to feel in my own house. I remember the night it all snapped. It was a Friday. Jada had a few friends over. Girls from her college, all polished and loud, throwing their bags on my white couch like it was theirs. Carla was out of town for a conference, so I was the only adult home. I didn't mind the noise, I was used to it, but something told me not to linger too long. I brought out extra sodas and snacks like I always did, trying not to hover. "Thanks, Mr. Reynolds," one of her friends said. I smiled, nodded, and turned to go. Then I heard it, loud enough to freeze me mid-step. Why does he always try so hard? Like, he's not even my real dad. He's such a wannabe. It's kind of pathetic. Laughter followed. Not shocked laughter, comfortable, complicit laughter. I didn't move. I stood just around the corner, out of sight, holding a tray of drinks like an idiot. My hands were shaking. Not with rage, something colder. Emptier. It wasn't just the words. It was the casualness of it. Like that's how she always talked about me. Like I was nothing more than a running joke in my own damn house. My chest tightened, but I swallowed it. I put the tray down, walked upstairs, and sat on the edge of my bed in silence for a long time. I must have stared at the floor for an hour before I could finally breathe normally again. The next morning, she came down like nothing happened. Hair in a messy bun, phone in hand, scrolling with that practiced disinterest. She didn't even look at me when she said, "We're out of oat milk." I looked at her, really looked. Her face was so familiar and yet so distant. "We're out of respect too," I said quietly. She blinked, confused. "What?" I stood up slowly, pushing my chair in. "You have 30 minutes to pack your things. You're no longer welcome here." She laughed. Literally laughed. "You're kidding." "I'm not. You can't just kick me out. This is my house." "No. It's mine. And you've made it clear you don't want me in your life. So I won't be." She stormed off, calling her mother. I could hear Carla's voice yelling through the phone. Shocked, furious. But I didn't care. I logged into my accounts, deactivated her credit card, revoked access to the shared vehicle, changed the smart lock codes. Everything I had set up to make her life easier, I shut down in under 20 minutes. She was still crying and pacing when I told her Uber was outside. I didn't hug her. I didn't yell. I didn't even look back when the door shut behind her. That night, I slept like a man who had just cut a tumor out of his chest. The kitchen was quiet the next morning, the kind of heavy silence that wraps around your shoulders like a wet towel. I sat alone at the table, sipping coffee gone lukewarm, watching the steam disappear faster than I could gather my thoughts. I'd barely slept, not out of regret, but from the weight of a decision that couldn't be undone. Jada had left the night before in a whirlwind of shocked protests and tearful accusations, but I hadn't budged. The words she'd said in front of her friends kept echoing through my head like a chant I couldn't unhear. Wannabe dad, pathetic. My chest tightened every time I remembered the smirks, the giggles, the way they dismissed me like I was a bad sitcom character. I hadn't expected gratitude, but that level of contempt, it hollowed something out of me. When Jada finally came down that morning, she looked like someone who'd just walked off a runway. Hair straightened, flawless makeup, attitude back in place. There wasn't an ounce of remorse on her face. She wore her defiance like a designer coat, zipped all the way up. She glanced at me, then at the untouched breakfast I'd made out of habit, eggs, toast, the oat milk she'd complained about, and gave a scoff so soft, it barely registered. I should have ignored it. Should have let it slide like all the other little slights. But something in me snapped. I was tired of letting things slide. I was tired of pretending to be okay while living with someone who clearly resented every breath I took in her presence. You can sit, I said without looking up, but you won't be staying. She laughed again. Still on that. I folded my hands on the table and looked her dead in the eye. You said what you said, and I'm done pretending like I didn't hear it. She rolled her eyes and leaned against the counter. It was a joke. God, you're so sensitive. No wonder you're not a real dad. I didn't flinch. Exactly. I'm not your real dad. So I have no obligation to house you, feed you, or bankroll your life. You're an adult now, Jada. You made your choice. Now live with it. She blinked, startled for just a moment. The cool girl exterior cracked. But then she smiled, tight, smug. Mom won't let this stand. I stood and picked up my keys. Then she's welcome to find you a place to stay. You've got 30 minutes. I left the house before I said something I couldn't take back. I drove around for a while, aimless, just trying to calm my heartbeat. My phone buzzed nonstop, calls from Carla, a few from Jada that I ignored. Each buzz felt like a demand, a tug at my patience. I parked at a strip mall, bought a coffee I didn't need, and sat in the lot staring out at nothing. When Carla finally sent a message that simply read, "We need to talk now," I drove back home, steeling myself. I'd expected anger. I didn't realize how far she'd be willing to push back. When I opened the door, they were both there, Jada on the couch like nothing had happened, Carla standing in the foyer with her arms crossed like a principal waiting to scold a student. I closed the door behind me and set my keys down with slow, deliberate movements. Carla wasted no time. You had no right, she snapped, voice trembling more with emotion than volume. This is my daughter. You don't get to just throw her out like trash. I took a breath, trying to stay calm. She disrespected me. Not just privately, but in front of her friends. She made a mockery of everything I've done for her. And you've allowed it to go on for years. She's a kid, Carla cried. She's 20, I corrected. A grown woman who knows exactly what she's doing. And if you really think this is just about one comment, then you haven't been paying attention. Carla stared at me like I'd spoken in another language. Jada, from her spot on the couch, smirked and twirled her phone between her fingers. That look, so smug, so unbothered, ignited something inside me I didn't know was still burning. I turned to Carla, trying one last time to reach her. Do you really not see it? The way she talks to me? The way she treats me like a joke? I never tried to replace her father. I just tried to be a decent man in her life. And she's done nothing but spit in my face for it. She's going through things. Carla shouted. You think she's perfect? She's been struggling. With identity, with pressure, with being held accountable? I interrupted. Because that's all this is. She's never had to face consequences, and now that she has, you're acting like I'm the villain. Jada stood, arms crossed. You act like you're some kind of hero. You bought things. Big deal. That doesn't make you a dad. I looked at her, really looked, and I felt nothing. No anger, no heartbreak. Just a cold understanding that this person was never going to see me as anything other than a wallet. You're right, I said quietly. I'm not your dad, but I was your lifeline, and I just cut the cord. Carla lunged forward, grabbing my arm. You can't do this, Darren. Please, don't let this ruin everything. But it already had. I pulled my arm away and stepped back. You made your choice the moment you let her walk back in here without an apology. You chose her comfort over my dignity. So what now? She whispered. I stared at her for a long moment before speaking. Now, I call my lawyer. There was a stillness in the room after that. Not silence, just stillness. Like everyone suddenly realized this wasn't just a fight. This was the moment things broke. Carla blinked fast like she was trying to hold back tears, but I didn't reach for her. I didn't comfort her. I'd done that too many times, only to be undermined later. Jada sank back into the couch, suddenly quiet, suddenly unsure. I went upstairs and closed the door behind me. My hands were steady as I took off my wedding ring and placed it on the nightstand. It was the most peaceful I'd felt in years. By the time I came downstairs the next morning, I already knew something was wrong. The house was too warm, too loud, too full of tension to be empty. I heard the unmistakable shuffle of flip-flops against hardwood and the low hum of voices I hadn't expected to hear again. Not yet, and not like this. When I turned the corner into the living room, there she was. Jada. On the couch, legs curled beneath her like she owned the place, a bowl of cereal in her lap and her phone in her hand. No apology, no sheepish glance, no remorse. Just a flick of her eyes in my direction before she turned back to her screen like I was the help again. And right behind her, standing with arms crossed and that practiced look of fury, Carla. She looked rested, resolved, like she'd had all night to convince herself she was right. Like she was ready to go to war over this. She didn't say anything at first, just stared at me like I was the one who'd crossed a line. My stomach sank, but I didn't flinch. I didn't say a word. I wanted to hear it straight from her mouth, the lie she had clearly decided to live with. Carla cleared her throat and gestured toward the couch. She's not going anywhere, she said. And you had no right to throw her out. I tilted my head, voice calm. No right. That's right, she said, stepping forward. She's my daughter. This is her home. No, I said flatly, this is my home. I bought it. I maintain it. I pay every bill in it. You moved in when we got married, and she came with you. That was the agreement. But she disrespected me in a way I can't ignore. And if you're telling me you're okay with that, then you're part of the problem. Carla's mouth opened like she had a response ready, but nothing came out. Just a flicker of something in her eyes. Guilt, maybe, or the distant recognition that I wasn't playing the role she'd assigned me anymore. Jada looked up again, still chewing, and said, God, you're so dramatic. It was just a joke. Her voice dripped with boredom, the kind that teenagers use when they want to let you know they stopped listening 10 minutes ago. I could feel my pulse rising, but I kept it buried deep. There was no point yelling. The message had already been delivered. Now it was time for action. You don't get to treat me like a joke and then live off my money, I said to Jada without raising my voice. Those days are over. Jada stood up, bowl still in hand. You think I want anything from you? Please, keep your money. I don't need you. I nodded once. Perfect. Then you won't mind leaving again. Today. Carla stepped between us. She's not leaving. If you think you're going to bully my daughter out of her own house. I'm not bullying anyone, I interrupted. I'm establishing boundaries. And if you're not willing to support that, then maybe you should pack a bag too. The air in the room changed after that. It got heavier, thicker, as if the truth had finally shown up and nobody knew how to breathe around it. Carla stared at me, stunned. For a second, I think she genuinely didn't believe I meant it. But I did. I meant every damn word. I walked past them both, grabbed my phone from the kitchen counter, and stepped outside. I didn't even need to call my lawyer again. We'd already had the prenup reviewed when things started unraveling months ago. He was just waiting for my green light. And I gave it, standing barefoot in my own backyard while my marriage crumbled inside. I stayed outside for nearly an hour, long enough to feel the sun warm my skin, long enough to hear the muffled sounds of Carla pacing upstairs, Jada slamming a door, someone throwing something that cracked on tile. But I didn't go back in until the house was quiet. I needed the silence. I needed the moment to register what I'd just set in motion. When I finally stepped back inside, Carla was in the dining room, sitting with her head in her hands. She looked up as I passed and whispered, "You really called him?" I did. She shook her head slowly. "You're blowing everything up over one fight." "No," I said. "I'm walking away from years of disrespect. That fight just reminded me I deserve better." I walked upstairs, packed a small bag, and booked a room downtown. I didn't want to stay in that house with them. Not anymore. It didn't feel like home. It hadn't in a long time, and now I knew why. I paused at the top of the stairs, listening for signs of life, but there was nothing. No footsteps. No words. Just a stillness that felt too familiar. I walked out, locked the door behind me, and didn't look back. At the hotel, I lay on the bed fully dressed, staring at the ceiling. My ring was still in the nightstand at home, and I didn't miss it. I ordered a drink from the bar downstairs and let it sit untouched on the table beside me. My phone buzzed with messages. Carla asking me to talk, Jada sending cryptic one-word texts like "seriously?" and "wow." I didn't respond. I blocked both of them for the night. I needed the silence more than anything. That night, I slept better than I had in years. Not because I was happy, not because I felt vindicated, but because, for the first time, I knew I had finally stood up for myself. I had drawn a line. And I was ready to watch the whole damn world burn if it meant not crossing it again. The thing about war, real war, is that nobody walks away clean. Even when you're right, even when you've drawn your boundaries with surgical precision, the fallout leaves shrapnel in places you didn't know could bleed. I checked out of the hotel 3 days after I moved in. Not because I was ready to come back, but because the hotel began to feel more like a bunker than a reprieve. Sterile walls, forced smiles at the front desk, the smell of overly bleached sheets. It all reminded me that I was in limbo, not liberation. So I went home. Not to reconcile. Not to bend. I went back because it was my house, and I'd be damned if I let 2 ungrateful people hold it hostage. When I walked in, I half expected a storm. Bags packed, voices raised, Carla demanding I reconsider, Jada tossing more venom from behind her phone. But the house was dead silent. Lights off, curtains drawn. The kind of silence you only hear when people have either given up or are plotting their next move. I found Carla in the kitchen, sipping wine at 10 in the morning like it was orange juice. She didn't look up when I entered. She just said, "Your lawyer called me." Her voice was flat, brittle. I said nothing. She took another sip. "So that's it. 20 years together, and you're just done?" I let the question hang. 20 years. That's what she said. But I remembered 10 of those years being me walking on eggshells, trying not to disrupt the tightrope she balanced between motherhood and avoidance. I finally answered, slow and steady. "I'm not done. I'm finally starting." She set the glass down hard, wine splashing up the sides. "You're punishing me for her behavior." I shook my head. "No. I'm holding you accountable for enabling it. You let her disrespect me for years. You made excuses, minimized my hurt, told me to let it go like I was being too sensitive. You chose comfort over truth, and now you're shocked I won't carry it anymore." She stood abruptly, eyes blazing. "You knew what you were walking into when you married me. I was a mother first." I nodded, and I respected that. "I never asked you to choose between us. But the second you brought her back into this house after what she said to me, you made your choice." The rest of that day passed like molasses. No yelling, no crying. Just 2 people tiptoeing around the ruins of what used to be a marriage. Jada didn't come out of her room once. I knew she was still in the house because the Wi-Fi log showed her phone connected all day. That, and I heard music through her door. The kind of passive-aggressive blaring that was supposed to let me know she was fine. That she didn't care. That she was winning. But winning what? That's what I kept asking myself. What game did she think she was playing? And what exactly was the prize? A house? Money? The satisfaction of watching someone who tried to care crumble under the weight of her contempt? A few days later, the papers were served. Carla didn't cry. She didn't even flinch. She looked at the envelope like it was a bill she forgot to pay. But I knew better. I knew her silence wasn't strength, it was surrender. She had no fight left in her because deep down, she knew I meant every word I'd said. The prenup held. Ironclad. My lawyer made sure of that before we even got engaged. Back then, Carla had called it unromantic and cold, but I told her it was just clarity. I'd built my life before her, and I wasn't going to risk losing it in the name of love. She signed it reluctantly. Now, that paper was the only thing protecting me from losing everything to people who treated me like an ATM with feelings. The fallout spread faster than I expected. Friends, neighbors, mutual acquaintances, they all had opinions. Some messaged me privately, saying things like, "I always thought Jada was a little, much, or honestly, good for you, man." Others took Carla's side, at least publicly. Her sister posted a cryptic Facebook status about men abandoning their responsibilities and fake father figures. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. The people who knew me, really knew me, already understood. They had seen the way Jada spoke to me at family gatherings, how Carla would laugh it off or say, "She's just being playful." Nobody ever pulled her aside. Nobody ever defended me. Now, suddenly, they all had something to say. It was a tenant of mine, Frank, a retired machinist who lived in one of my rental duplexes, who gave me the most honest reaction. I'd stopped by to check a leaky faucet, just needing a break from the house, when he handed me a beer and said, "I heard about what happened." I braced for judgment, but he just shrugged. "You're not wrong. You know, people treat kindness like a weakness. But pulling the plug? That takes guts." We sat in silence for a bit, just sipping and watching the sun dip behind the trees. Then he added, "Took me 2 divorces to learn the same thing. One day, you wake up and realize that peace is more valuable than being liked." I didn't reply, but his words settled in me like stone. Back at the house, Carla had begun packing. Quietly, methodically. No theatrics. She knew the timeline. The prenup gave her a 30-day window after filing to vacate, and she wasn't going to fight it. Jada, on the other hand, hadn't packed a single thing. She kept strutting around like none of it applied to her. When I asked if she had made arrangements, she rolled her eyes and muttered, "You seriously think I'm leaving?" I didn't respond. I just walked away. She was about to learn the difference between teenage rebellion and adult consequences. The moment Carla was out, so was she. No lease. No rights. No more tolerance. What stunned me most wasn't the disrespect. It was the complete lack of self-awareness. Neither of them had taken a moment to reflect. There was no apology. No conversation. Just indignation and entitlement. Carla had once told me that Jada would grow out of her attitude. But instead of growing out of it, she'd been nourished by it, fed by excuses, shielded from accountability. And now that shield had cracked, she just didn't realize it yet. By the end of the week, movers had been scheduled. Carla asked if I'd be willing to talk one last time before she left. I agreed. We sat on the front porch like strangers, watching a thunderstorm roll in. She turned to me and said, "You know, I don't hate you." I nodded. "I don't hate you either." She looked down at her hands. "I just thought, if we held on long enough, maybe things would smooth over." I sighed. They didn't. And they won't. Because smoothing over isn't healing. It's hiding. She didn't argue. We watched the rain come down in heavy sheets, and for a moment, there was peace. But peace, I'd learned, came at a cost, and I was finally ready to pay it. There's something strange about walking through a house that used to be full of life, only to find it empty, not of people, but of energy. The air hangs heavier. Every room echoes. You start to realize how much noise a presence makes, even if it was toxic. Carla had moved out 2 days earlier. The last box went into a U-Haul she didn't bother to rent herself. Her brother came and helped, barely saying a word to me. I didn't expect a goodbye from her. I didn't get one either. Jada, though, was another story. She didn't leave with her mother. She stayed behind, as if by sheer force of will, she could undo reality. I gave her 72 hours. I told her, flat and unemotional, "You're not staying here. Pack what you want. What's left after that is trash." She called me a monster. I called it closure. But in the quiet moments that followed, when the front door clicked shut and I was finally, completely alone, I didn't feel victorious. I didn't feel free. I felt heavy, not with regret, No, that ship had sailed, but with memories. Old ones. The kind that sneak up on you when the anger fades and all that's left is a string of what-ifs. I remember Jada at 13, standing in the doorway of my office holding a math test with a giant red F on it. She looked embarrassed but determined. "I don't get it," she mumbled. "Can you help?" And I did. I sat with her for hours, going through equations I hadn't touched since high school. She hated every second of it, but she kept showing up every afternoon until the grades started turning around. She never said thank you, but I didn't do it for that. There was the Christmas she asked for a PlayStation. Her dad had promised it months before, and of course, he didn't deliver. She didn't cry, just shrugged like she expected it. I waited until the stores opened the next morning and found one 3 cities over. Drove 2 hours, stood in line with other desperate parents, paid double what it was worth. When I got home and handed it to her, she didn't even unwrap it. Just said, "You didn't have to do that." But I did, because I wanted her to feel like someone finally came through, like someone kept their promise. That night, I told Carla I wasn't trying to buy Jada's love. I just didn't want her to feel abandoned. Carla kissed my cheek and said, "She'll come around." But she never did. One afternoon, when she was 16, I found her crying in the garage. I didn't ask questions. I just sat beside her. After a while, she mumbled that a boy she liked had called her too weird to date. She looked so small then, so vulnerable. I told her she was brilliant, beautiful, and too much for small-minded people. She didn't respond, but she stopped crying. That was the thing. I was always there when things went wrong. I was the one holding the net when she fell. But that never translated into respect, not even acknowledgement. I started to realize she didn't want a net. She wanted someone to blame when she crashed. And when I wouldn't play that part anymore, I became the enemy. I kept thinking back to one night, maybe 2 years ago, when Carla and I had a fight about Jada's tone. I'd asked her, gently, not to curse at me in the middle of dinner. Carla had brushed it off. "She's just being expressive," she said. "She's testing limits." I told her I was tired of being the only one drawing boundaries. Carla got defensive, told me I didn't understand what it meant to raise a teenage girl. But I wasn't trying to raise her. I was trying to coexist, trying to be a constant presence, the way a decent man should be. But I never had a partner in that. Carla always played mediator, never enforcer. And that was the beginning of the end. When I finally walked into Jada's room to clean it out, the smell hit me first. Vanilla candles, perfume, a hint of dry shampoo. It was like stepping into a memory preserved in scent. Her posters were still on the wall, though curling at the edges. A pile of clothes lay half-folded on the bed, like she'd planned to pack and just didn't. On the desk, I found an envelope with my name on it. My stomach tightened. I sat on the edge of the bed, opened it, and pulled out a letter written in that dramatic cursive she always used when she wanted something to look deep. It wasn't an apology. Of course not. It was a guilt trip. 3 pages of emotional blackmail written with a steady hand and a sharp tongue. She accused me of never truly loving her, of doing things just to look like a good guy, of making her feel like an outsider in her own home. "You were always trying to impress people," she wrote, "not love them." That line stung, not because it was true, but because it was so far from the truth it felt like slander. Every sacrifice I made, every small gesture, I didn't do it for show. I did it because I believed that love wasn't just words. It was consistency, reliability, action. But I guess none of that matters if the person on the receiving end is determined not to see it. I didn't respond to the letter. I didn't even keep it. I folded it back into the envelope, walked to the fireplace, and lit a match. It burned fast, curling at the edges, turning sharp words into ash. I stood there watching until the last ember died, and I felt lighter. Not absolved, just clear. She'd made her truth known, and I had no obligation to carry it anymore. Later that night, I got a message from one of Carla's cousins, someone I barely knew. She said, "I know you're going through a lot. I just wanted to say, I always thought you were a good man. Jada and Carla, they took advantage of that. And I'm sorry you got caught in the middle." It was a small thing, but it meant more than I expected. Because sometimes, all you need is one person to say, "I saw it too." It took me nearly a week before I could walk through the entire house without stopping in a doorway and wondering what used to be there, what energy, what echo, what version of myself. There was a time this house felt too big for one man. Now it felt just right. Every room had a quietness that didn't feel lonely. It felt earned. I moved slowly through it, like someone recovering from surgery. No TV blaring in the background. No footsteps stomping up the stairs in defiance. No doors slamming in place of conversations. Just peace. A heavy, sacred peace that had cost me nearly everything I thought I was building, but gave me back something much more important, myself. The first morning I spent truly alone. I made coffee in silence and stood barefoot on the kitchen tile, staring out the window at the backyard I used to mow by hand just to save a few bucks. I saw the old swing set that I put together one summer when Jada said she missed having one. She used it exactly twice. But I never took it down. For years, I kept thinking, maybe one day, she'll bring her own kids back to this yard. Maybe one day, she'll see what I was trying to give her. That fantasy died the moment I read her letter. And when I finally pulled that rusted swing set apart with a crowbar, it wasn't sadness I felt. It was release. Like I was removing something that no longer belonged. A memory I no longer needed to pretend meant something to both of us. A few days later, I donated 3 boxes of her old things to a local shelter. Clothes she never wore, gadgets she never used, books she never read. I kept one photo, just one, of the 3 of us at the lake during a summer trip. Carla had made us all wear matching t-shirts. Jada looked miserable, but the sun hit her hair just right, and there was the tiniest hint of a smile on her face. I kept that photo not because I missed her, but because I wanted to remember that I had tried. That I had really tried. That I didn't walk away casually or cruelly. I walked away after giving every damn chance that should have been given. And then some. I changed the locks. Not just because it made sense legally, but because I needed the ritual. I needed to hear the metal click into place and know that this space, this sanctuary, was mine now. No more shared decisions. No more looking over my shoulder for validation that never came. It was a strange feeling, standing at my front door with a set of brand new keys. Like a man who'd finally come home, even though he never really left. I slept better that week than I had in over a decade. My dreams were quiet. No faces. No yelling. Just silence. And the hum of an air conditioner that no longer had to compete with drama. Then, just as things began to settle, I got a message request on social media from Jada. The profile photo was recent. She was older now, a little more refined, but the smirk was still there. Her message was simple. I hope you're happy. You ruined everything. That was it. No greeting. No pretense. Just a last stab from someone who still couldn't admit that they had pushed too far. I didn't block her right away. I stared at the message for a full 10 minutes. Then I typed. I didn't ruin anything. I walked away from being disrespected. If that ruined your fantasy of endless support with zero accountability, then maybe it was time it got ruined. I hovered over the send button. Then I deleted it. I didn't need to say a thing. The silence would be louder. Instead, I went to the living room, poured myself a glass of bourbon, and sat by the fireplace. It wasn't cold, but I lit it anyway. Not for warmth, just for the symbolism. I watched the flames flicker, thinking about everything I'd lost, the family I tried to build, the partner I believed in, the daughter I thought might grow to love me. But in that same breath, I realized what I'd gained. The strength to say enough. The clarity to know when kindness has been mistaken for weakness. And the backbone to walk away with my head held high. A week later, I got an invitation to a mutual friend's barbecue. I almost didn't go. I didn't want the sideways glances, the half-whispered questions, the forced sympathy. But I went anyway. Because I needed to step back into the world as me. Not as a husband, not as a stepfather, not as a scapegoat. Just me. And to my surprise, people noticed. One friend pulled me aside and said, "You look lighter. Like a weight's off." I smiled. Because it is. We talked. We laughed. We played cards. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel like I had to explain myself. Later that night, I came home, took off my shoes, and stood in the foyer. That silence, the same silence that once felt suffocating, now felt like a song. A hymn to my own freedom. I didn't need noise to fill the space. I didn't need people to make it feel like home. I needed respect. I needed boundaries. I needed peace. And now I had all three. They say family is forever, but I've learned that's only true when there's mutual respect. Love without respect is manipulation. Sacrifice without acknowledgement is servitude. I walked away not because I stopped caring, but because I started caring about myself. I'll never regret what I gave, but I'll never apologize for choosing peace over performance again. If you've ever reached a breaking point in your own family, I want to hear about it. What boundaries did you draw, and what did it cost you? Drop your story in the comments below. And if this story hit a little too close to home, go ahead and hit that like button, subscribe for more, and share this with someone who needs a reminder. Peace isn't given, it's claimed. See you soon in the next story.